This is Lehigh Valley Political Pulse. I'm Tom Shortell. It's been weeks since President Donald Trump unveiled his grand tariff plan. 10% tariffs across the board, 25% tariffs on the auto industry, reciprocal tariffs on some of our closest trading partners. This week, I'm joined by political scientist Chris Borick to discuss the consequences of this historic decision. At the time of recording, Trump has paused most of his proposals to allow for negotiations. There's been a lot of confusion in the market as the world tries to figure out what's actually happening and what could happen. Chris, has public opinion been able to make heads or tails of the situation?
It's been challenging for the public, for commentators, analysts, to really get a handle on the reactions that we've had as a society to the president's tariffs. They're fast-moving. They're widespread. They're constantly changing. And any time you have something as important as a policy tool that could affect prices and availability of goods, you're going to have lots of potential impact on how individuals see the president, how they see the direction of the country. And so these have been incredibly turbulent times for, I think, Americans as they try to really get a handle on where the president is headed with his tariff policies and economic policies in general.
Trump made clear while campaigning that he wanted to raise tariffs across the board. Kamala Harris hit him hard on these proposals in some of the debates, and Trump didn't back down. Why are so many people surprised by this turn of events?
I think because if you look at President Trump over the course of his time in office and his time in the public eye, he's often said things that people consider to be part of a broader negotiation stance, right? That he says things, but he doesn't necessarily follow through on them in a complete way. And I think there's lots of evidence for that over the course of his first term and throughout his again, time in the public eye. And so I think a lot of Americans, when they heard what he said last fall, said, well, he'll temper that, right? He says things to get us in a place where we might be able to now negotiate. But when it comes to the end, he'll modify it or come up with a deal, right, beforehand or claim victory and be happy and move on. In this case, at least to a substantial degree, he's stuck closer to what he promised in terms of tariffs than he has in the past. And I think that for some Americans, some people in business, some people that hold stock, and was something that they said, well, I didn't necessarily know it would be this. And that's what's led to some of the reactions that we see. You asked originally about polling. Yeah, Americans are concerned. There's significant levels of concern about the president's approach right now. There's some people who are standing by him in an overall appraisal, but on economic issues and even in his overall approval ratings, we've seen a hit for his standing.
I want to push back on some of what you just said because, as I noted, right now, most of these tariffs are paused. Like he had tariffs with Canada and Mexico announced earlier in the year, and he paused those almost immediately. So not too many, like the ones against China at the time of recording, and a handful of other nations are still in place. But by and large, he's kind of like pushed the stop button on most of these within a few days of the announcement. So has he actually done what people think he's done?
That's the challenge. Ask an American right now, as the time of this recording, what are the tariffs that the president has introduced? And they've shifted so many times. They've started, they've stopped, they've been paused, they've been increased, they've been decreased. I think it's hard. I mean, I'll speak for myself. That's what I do for a living, and I follow this on any daily basis, trying to make sure I know exactly where the president has left tariffs at any given day is a challenge. And so, as you said, well, maybe it is kind of what he's done. He puts them in there and he backs up and he negotiates and pauses. Um, but for the public, I think, especially, the taxes he released, the very broad ranging taxes that he created at that big, Rose Garden event,
Liberation Day.
Liberation Day. I think that it caught the public, the scope, the size, the certainty. The administration, the Treasury Secretary, Secretary of Commerce said these are not negotiation. These are real. People listen. People start to say, okay, well, that's what it is. And so even if you back up, the ability of the public to appraise that and to keep up is challenging. That uncertainty, it's probably the most overused word right now. Markets hate uncertainty, the public hates uncertainty. But yeah, they do. And at the end of the day, when you create uncertainty, you're going to have a lot of discomfort.
Most economists have serious reservations about Trump's plans, yet the president pulled the trigger on them anyway. Is there something about public perception of American manufacturing that makes this a more palatable risk for Trump?
It's a really interesting way to think about it, Tom. Manufacturing. Let's step back for a second. Has this incredibly important place in American culture and identity. It's who we are. We sit, next to Bethlehem Steel, the site, and it's iconic, right? And we use things that are iconic. That means they mean things to us, and manufacturing means a lot to us. We like to consider ourselves a building country, and so when you have a goal, as the president has, to bring manufacturing back to the country, you get enormous support for it. From individuals. They'll say, yes, well, we want to build things here, and we have reasons to do it. It's national security. There's lots of upside for it. And then you think, well, how are we going to get there? And for the president, his chosen method, or at least the one that he likes to talk about the most, is through tariffs. He thinks that's the means to do that. And some Americans see that connection, right? You see some people in the auto industry and others that say, yeah, this is the way we can do that. Other people are much more question that approach, that it could do what it seeks to do, that America is prepared to actually build lots of things again if we just put up tariffs from outside sources. Will they do it? Those questions. You bring up economists. Economists are not a universal group, but as anybody that would speak with classically trained economists, they'll warn all up and down the line about tariffs and what they've done historically and what impacts they've had. Does the president necessarily care a lot about what economists say? I don't think so. But certainly, many economists would caution about this approach.
Last year, the Cato Institute commissioned a poll that found that 80% of Americans believe more stateside manufacturing would be a boon for the country. But only 25% of people on the same poll believe that they personally would be better off working in a factory. Is that just me, or is that a huge disconnect?
It's an amazing disconnect, or at least complex part of our acknowledgement. As I said before, we love the idea of manufacturing. And part of Americans' history is deep in what we build. Our products that we love and admire, that we think this represents, if it's Bethlehem Steel, Mack Truck, whatever, locally, right, Crayola crayons. We love the aspect that we built it, right, to do it. And so it doesn't surprise me when the Cato Institute does a poll and find that Americans, I think we should do more manufacturing, that we would do it. It doesn't surprise me also that a lot of Americans don't see their future tied to manufacturing, because most of us aren't in manufacturing. All of us are consumers. Almost all of us are consumers, and we're affected by where and how and at what level things are manufactured. And so that's why tariffs eventually become this really big thing. They might benefit certain segments of the economy, might stimulate down the road, and maybe in the short term, some manufacturing in the U.S., and that will help individuals. But for a lot of Americans, that's not going to be felt as directly as what they pay for prices, and we know, or pay on products. and the prices for those. And so, as you said on the second part, most people don't think they don't want to work in manufacturing. They don't see their future in manufacturing, and they know that the policies that might be put in place, like tariffs, are going to have an impact on other aspects of their life, like what they pay and what's available to them.
Do lawmakers have the same stomach for this plan as the president? Tariff control ultimately resides with Congress, so it theoretically could step in.
Yeah, very, very directly, they have power to do this. As we know right now, the Republican Congress, controlled both houses. Republicans do have shown very little interest in challenging the president on this. You've had individuals in both houses speak about the dangers of tariffs, and some have gone with what I would call rather ceremonial votes on the matter to express their views. But there's not, at least at this point, a major desire, I think, or willingness on the part of Republicans to confront the president in that way. The fear of being primaried, as we talk about, I think is real for a lot of Republicans. In fact, you see that happening already in a place like Texas, right, where John Cornyn's going to probably be tested by Paxton, the Attorney General there. Those type of things. There's a number of those, and so there's a reticence to go up against the president on this. At the same time, this is I think the trouble for Republicans right now. They don't want to necessarily confront him on an institutional level or an individual level, but there's going to be a midterm election where these policies are going to be put on the ballot in the form of whoever's running for offices. And that's where Republicans are nervous. That's where Republicans are thinking, are these policies going to help them in 2026, or are they going to be an anchor? And I think when you combine it with the cyclical nature of American politics, I think the possibility that these actions of the president come back to cost some Republicans their seats in 2026 is real. And that's the predicament that a lot of Republican legislators find themselves in.
How about the Democrats? Because, historically, labor has been a huge part of their support. It hasn't been in the last decade or so, as Trump has kind of successfully stolen a lot of those supporters. Do Democrats necessarily want to fight him on creating American manufacturing?
It's a really challenging circumstance for Democrats because, as you said, historically their ties, and not only historically, contemporary, the ties to unions, workers in the United States remain strong. Maybe not always with rank and file, but leadership in those organizations, and they have to walk a tightrope themselves. Tom, they can speak, about the president's tools, the use of tariffs as this thing that's not popular, and cite that. But they've got to be careful to really distance themselves from anything that kind of undermines their relationship with those unions and organized labor in the country. That might see some of those tariffs as very beneficial to them. So you think right now, as we're talking in the last few weeks, people like AOC and Bernie Sanders are out, right? Kind of taking the progressive arguments and the anti-Trump case and trying to crystallize it in this way that really targets certain issues. They'll talk a little bit about tariffs, but where's most of their direction aimed at oligarchs, right, and the powerful that are controlling this, rather than kind of tying it to the issues that we talk about with labor.
That's Muhlenberg College political scientist Chris Borick. This has been Lehigh Valley Political Pulse. I'm Tom Shortell.